Hello everyone, this is Hugo from Ichiban Painting, and as promised in the previous video, today I'll be explaining how an airbrush works, So the previous video I was talking in introduction on, why you should, choose an airbrush and whatnot. So today what I want to do is talk a little bit about an airbrush. Airbrushes have the same principle. There's two categories of airbrush. There's single action airbrush and double action airbrush. On the little picture that you see here right now, this is a standard, it's double action airbrush. So the basic principle as an airbrush is that you have your air connected to the airbrush here. Your air comes in, goes in the bottom of the airbrush and flows all the way here. Then you have a needle in the middle with a paint cup here, and this paint cup actually, when you're going to be pulling the lever out, and when you're going to be pulling this lever back, it's going to pull back the needle, and the needle is going to actually allow paint to go in here and spray. So the more you pull back, the more the needle goes back. The more the needle goes back, the more paint you have. The difference between a single action and a double action is quite easy actually. Is that a double action has two mechanisms. The first one is when you pull on the main lever, when you pull down, push down on it, it's going to activate the air valve here, and it's going to actually release the air, and the air is going to go into it's going to start spraying, right? And the double action airbrush, the more you pull, the more air goes out. The lesser you push. Why I say pull? You can control your air while pushing it, and in different, if you're pushing it hard or softly. Then after that, same thing. The more you pull back, then you are gonna have allowing paint. So the more you pull back, the more paint's gonna go out. So that's why we call it double action, because you need to push and pull for it to work. A single action, kind of the same thing, but it doesn't have two actions on it. It doesn't have two mechanisms. So actually, when you pull on it, it's gonna shoot air and paint at the same time. So not two double action, but the main principle is like that. So this is mostly how all airbrushes work. This is what we call a gravity airbrush. You have three types of airbrush. You have what we call a gravity airbrush, which means that the paint cup is on top of the airbrush and it uses gravity to go outside and spray. You have side cups, which is actually a cup that's on the side of the airbrush here, so separately, and it's attached to here. A side cup works the same way, but it doesn't use gravity. And then after that, you have a siphon cup, which is under the airbrush, which doesn't use the gravity again. It uses siphoning to spray out paint. Normally for a hobby airbrush, you should be thinking about using a gravity airbrush. Why? Because gravity airbrushes are the easiest to and the most available airbrushes on the market, but I think, from my own personal opinion, and also they are the easiest to take care of it. Siphoning or cups that are under or on side cups are a little bit I don't know, it's a personal preferences. I don't like them, some people like them, so it's really a personal thing. So now I'm going to just show you the breakdown, and I'm going to be using one of my old airbrush, a really cheap airbrush, what we call an eBay airbrush. That airbrush is actually not a real eBay airbrush. It came with the latest compressor that I bought. It was a kit, so I bought it, and it had an airbrush. I was like, yeah, I have an airbrush, but I don't know, I have a tendency to break my airbrushes, so this one is also broken. I have like 5 airbrushes, and I have 5 broken airbrushes. I have a new one coming in, supposed to arrive in probably an hour or so. So my new baby, and I have my other baby that's gone to the factories because I had a problem with it and I had to take care of it. So, but I'll be using this airbrush as a demonstration because probably it's going to be the most common airbrush that you're going to be starting with. So I really wanted to showcase it. So basically what you have is that in the front part you normally have 3 parts. So you have your needle protector, you have your nozzle protector or nozzle cap. So needle protector is this one. They have different size and shapes. This is, you have to try it out. Some of them are full like this one. Some of them are cut here, so you can see your needles. So depending on if you're doing more precise work and things like that. So it's up to you or the airbrush that you're gonna buy. Normally if you buy a cheap airbrush from eBay, you're gonna get a cup like that. Doesn't really matter. Some people actually don't put that cap on. They just paint with the needle protector. The needle protector is gonna actually go. The nozzle protector or nozzle nozzle cap's gonna go on top. And here normally you have a nozzle, it's not there, but the nozzle is what creates pressure, and you know, gives you the fine detailing, or you know, in millimeters. So you know, you have a 0.1 millimeter or 0.2 millimeter nozzle is going to create, you know, that fine line. So that's for the front part. So you have three parts: the nozzle, the needle protector, the nozzle protector, then you have the nozzle. Or it might have some other technical term, but that's how I like to call them. If we go from the back of the airbrush now, you have a tightening screw to tighten and to make sure that your needle is not working. Then after that you have your needle. I'll go back on the needle itself after. So you can take that little tightening pin in the back. Then after that you can unscrew this part here. This is the blocker, or I call it the blocker. Like I said, you know, it's my term, it's not the technical term. The blocker actually blocks the spring out. So the way this inside works is that this is screwed in inside. This is actually leaning against your trigger, and this is screwed in, so it gives pressure. So when you push in on the trigger with the spring, gives you a little bit of it gives you resistance, right? So you have these three parts: so the back block, the spring, and the little guide, or whatever you want to call it. And then normally inside the trigger, I'm gonna do the same breakdown with my more expensive airbrush a little bit later, and you're gonna see the trigger assembly is a little bit different. But this is normally what a normal airbrush looks like. Even Iwata, that are not really cheap airbrushes, that are expensive airbrushes, they use the same trigger mechanism. So you have two pins that are gonna sit on a pin rest in the middle of the airbrush here, and then this, when you press it down, is gonna apply pressure on the valve that's inside the airbrush, and is gonna release the air out. And you have that little thingy thing. Note that for most airbrushes is always the same. The curve goes towards the back. So the recessed area goes towards the gun, and that's actually what's gonna make contact with this pin here, and that's gonna actually allow you to push it back when you release the trigger. So basically now you just broken down your airbrush. Of course, yeah, you can you can take it out more apart. There's other parts that are, you need you know, tools to take out. There's a screw here. If you take it off, then you can take off another part inside, and you can access your valve, and then you can unscrew this part. It's screwed tight, but you can unscrew this part and then access the valve from there. But most of the time, if you're going to be cleaning your airbrush, if you're new and you just got a new shiny toy, a new shiny airbrush, basically this is going to be what you're going to be working with. And then to put it back together, you start off with this little curvy thing, and you put it in, like I said, the curve facing backwards. Then you're going to take the trigger, make sure that the little notch here goes towards the back, because when you're pulling the airbrush, if you don't put it like that, it's gonna actually hit the metal of the body. Then after that, you make like I just did, you tilt it so that the little pin goes there. Make sure that the trigger is at the right spot, you feel it. Then after that, what you need to do is put on the needle guide. That's how I like to call it. Put on your needle guide first, then after that go put in your spring. Then after that, use the back block, screw the back block in, like so, all the way in until it hits. Then you don't need to screw it tightly. Then after that, you put your needle in. Okay, just before I put the needle in, I just want to talk about the needle. The needle is what's gonna, the nozzle and the needle together is gonna make you know, precision, and make you have precision with your airbrush. So you always need to handle the needle with care. Needles are gonna get worn out with time, so they're gonna lose their smooth finish, and also they're gonna lose their sharpiness at the end. So you're gonna have to change your needle, and also if you're not careful with your needle, you're gonna bend them. If you bend your needles, then the bent tip of the needle, that's gonna be like my finger now, it's gonna be like this, is gonna actually make your airbrush spray a little bit crookedly. So you need to be careful with your needle. Before putting the needle in, you must ensure that the trigger is well seated in her area, or the area, because if it's standing up like this, you're actually gonna put the needle under the trigger, and then it's going to be blocked there. So make sure that you push your trigger and it's sitting right properly. Then after that, carefully insert the needle in the airbrush all the way until it hits the nozzle. Now I don't have a nozzle, so it moves freely, but insert it until it hits the nozzle. Then after that, you can put in your needle secure or a needle nut, and then everything is gonna be moving smoothly. And if you don't put that nut in the back, actually the block is gonna move, but the needle is gonna stay firm, fixed. So like this is gonna be working. Then after that, you put your nozzle guard and your needle guard, and you're done. When you're cleaning your airbrush, a thing that you need to do, you have two ways of cleaning your airbrush. The first way is that you put paint in it. Then after that, you use some airbrush cleaner. There's ways that you can make this liquid home. I like to buy it pre-made. I don't know, it's good stuff, so, and it's cheap, so I don't really care. So the first way is that once you finish spraying, take your airbrush. I have the sink really close, so the way I do it is I take my airbrush, I go to the sink, I put water in the cup, then I empty it a couple of times just to clean out the bigger of the water. Then what I do is under running water, I carefully pull my needle back and forth a couple of times, like so, just to make sure that the nozzle inside is you know, clear and there's no paint that's attached to it. Then I spray with the airbrush a couple of times with water. Then once that is done, I empty it out, and then I put some airbrush cleaner in it, and I spray it, and that's it. That's when I want to do a click queen. Wow, a click. Oh my god, I woke up really early this morning. A quick clean. Some guys just run airbrush cleaner through it, and that's it. So it really depends on you guys. But as you can see, I use this airbrush for spraying and doing a lot of base coating, since it does have a big nozzle, and it was the airbrush that I had the biggest nozzle on it. And actually you can see inside the cup, it's really clean, so I always take care of my airbrushes. Another thing is that actually if you're spraying some urethane, not urethane, wow, I'm really tired. If you're spraying some acrylic paint has a tendency to dry really fast, so it does dry in the airbrush and clogs up the airbrush, so you need to be really careful. The second way you can clean your airbrush is actually by taking it apart. So if you're taking your airbrush apart, don't go crazy on it. What I normally do is that I unscrew the back pin like this, take out the needle, clean the needle really carefully. Then after that, I take out the front nozzle, not the nozzle, but the nozzle protector and the nozzle cap. Clean those two out, make sure the nozzle is clean and there's nothing into it. Then after that, I take one of the magic Q-tips and make sure I can clean the inside of the cup with a airbrush cleaner. And then I polish my needle once everything is clean. Then I put everything back together, and once that is done, I run in some airbrush cleaner and shoot it in a paint trap. Then once that is done, I run water into it, and then I put it on its rack, and it's done. When I airbrush, I never leave the cap in the back. A lot of people do leave the cap. When I'm running a cheap airbrush like that, I don't put the cap on, because it doesn't do anything special. It just protects this. But I like, since I change colors a lot, I like to have this part accessible, but that's up to you. It's just a personal preferences. You're gonna see on the breakdown and the showcase of my other airbrush that it does have some more functionality onto the back cap, so it's a little bit different, but that's gonna be a second video talking about more high-end airbrushes. So this video was more about the function, how does an airbrush function, how to break down a cheap or an entry-level airbrush, and how to take care of it. So I think that wraps it up. Next video, like I just said, is going to be about higher end airbrushes, and maybe I'm going to throw in, if I have some time, to the material and talking about compressors. So this is Hugo from Ichiban Painting. Hope you liked the video. Click on the bottom of the page that way, and click on the little like button. It does help me a lot, and I'll see you on the next video.